Prime Minister, the IRMA recovery funds fall under your portfolio.
The what?
IRMA recovery funds, the
Yes.
NRPB.
NRPB, yes.
One of the objectives of those recovery funds is to develop local capacity for resilience and recovery and rebuilding. I've received feedback from some local construction companies that the criteria to qualify for some of the projects are such an extent that they're being excluded, and basically means that only foreign construction companies are going to be able to qualify. And apparently there's construction companies that may be state-sponsored, so their prices are artificially low and make it difficult for them to comply or for local companies to be competitive. Are you aware of this, and is this something that you're looking into to ensure that local participation is included in these projects?
Yes, so I am aware of that. I even wrote a letter to the NRPB discussing this matter. It's a procurement that has been worked on by the World Bank about the references to be able to get a project to execute. Government is not in that establishing of procurement, for example, in the bidding of projects. That is not our part. That means that they keep guidelines for procurement, and on the base of those procurement guidelines, that decision has been taken, I understood, to give some projects to foreign construction companies. You have to realize, though, that, of course, my preference goes out to give local companies the priority. I stated that also in the letter that I sent to the NRPB. But at the end of the day, as a government, the deal that has been made between the Netherlands and the World Bank and the steering committee is that we as a government would only indicate the projects that we would like for Country St. Martin, and that they from the NRPB and the steering committee and the World Bank would decide about how they're going to actually finalize the request and the wishes of the government of St. Martin. And that is outside our prerogative and our authority. But for sure, I'm aware it is unfortunately that is happening. I wrote a letter, as I told you, about this finding. And still, it's a point of discussion that is still being discussed with the government of the Netherlands too.
Prime Minister, you still did not indicate the total cost.
Oh, yes, of course. Yes, not because I didn't want, but I forgot to do that. I gave some figures last, I think it was on request of a question posed in Parliament. We spent approximately in the deal to rent the containers, out of my head, approximately 1.8 million for the rent of the first set of 10 megawatt containers, approximately. And if I'm not mistaken, we have spent approximately 7.6 million in the purchase of the 20 megawatt containers. I do not know the figure exactly, but I recall, if you ask me a guideline in direction of figures, I recall those two figures of 1.7 and some, and the amount of 7.6 million, if I recall. That is only for the renting part and the rent to owe second set of 20 megawatt containers. And still, we have still to go with long-term investments to give guarantee to stability to the grid for Country St. Martin.
Perhaps, Prime Minister, you can send me the correct information later, because what I was looking at is the total cost. So there is a cost to set up these.
I will have to look for the total cost for this intervention,
yes,
of course, no
that
problem.
To me. Thank you so much.
No problem.
My question, Prime Minister, recently the shareholders of Enya, apparently they've approved for the sale of Mullet Bay. And I know this was a very big topic during the budget debate. So given that this step has been taken now by the shareholders, I would like to know whether government is privy to any information as to whether there are any potential buyers, and what steps can and will government take now that this decision has been made to be a player in this process. And can we afford Mullet Bay? I mean, yeah.
Can we afford Mullet Bay or not? That is a financial question. You know where Mullet Bay is located? Yes. Where? In St. Martin. You know where Mullet Bay is going to stay? In St. Martin. So Mullet Bay is, at the end of the day, in St. Martin. Secondly, a decision has been taken about the selling of Mullet Bay, as you stated in your question. That's only a decision. The follow-up and that decision has not taken place yet. So because there is still a decision can be taken in a resolution, for example, but that does not mean that the details are known and how are we going to move forward on the basis of a decision or a resolution. So we will have to wait and see what direction this is going, and when the time is there that we know what direction this is heading on the basis of the decision that has been taken with the selling of Mullet Bay, we will take the necessary actions to move forward with the possibility of how we're going to fit ourselves as government with our limited financial capacity to see how we're going to move forward with this Mullet Bay. We have to think very big now, as I said just now. Don't forget, at the end of the day, nobody can put this Mullet Bay in a luggage package and take it in the plane with them. At the end of the day, Mullet Bay is going to stay in St. Martin.
Are you SXV insured? Do you have a valid medical insurance status? SXV is cardless. Request your My SXV account today and enter the virtual office of SXV. Go to sxv.sx and sign up now.
SXV, yeah. Your social health insurances.
It's hurricane season. Are you prepared? Here are a few tips to keep in mind to help keep you and your family safe. The Atlantic hurricane season runs from June 1st to November 30th, with the peak occurring between mid-August and late October. This hurricane season, be sure to put together a go bag. A disaster supply kit including a flashlight, batteries, cash, first aid and supplies, medications, and copies of your critical information if you need to evacuate. This public service announcement was brought to you by the government of St. Martin.
My name is Lenworth Wilson Jr., and today the presentation is, as I said, the principles of fatherhood. It's about understanding the roles, the responsibilities, and the impact of being a father. So as you watch this presentation, I hope you share it with those who you think it could impact, those who are presently fathers, those who are to-be fathers, even young men understanding what that role would include when it's their time to become a father. For the presentation, the main concepts or topics being covered are the presence of a father, role modeling, communication, guidance and discipline, support and encouragement, adaptability, and of course, the seventh principle being partnership with a co-parent. Quite interesting. And I'll just go into a little bit of detail here, but we have some other presenters in this series that may go further in depth with some of these topics. Like I know Dr. Nolan Nanton will delve a little deeper into the co-parenting topic. So we'll just touch on it here as one of the principles. And finally, we'll do the impact of effective fatherhood. All right. So, if you're ready, let's get into the conversation. The first principle that we want to talk about today is the principle of presence. And now throughout this presentation, I'll try to weave a bit of my story into it, my experience of being the son of a great father, both my earthly father and my heavenly father. And then also a bit of my experience in being in a father figure role. And so we'll see how my experience is incorporated in this. Because to be honest, one of the things that was a challenge for me when asked to be a part of this series is the fact that, you know, that little voice, a little thing on your shoulder, trying to tell you that you're not qualified for this conversation. I'm not a biological father. I am an educator. I am a youth advocate. And so I've been working with children and young people for my entire adult life. And I have an adopted son. And so I've been playing directly a father role in his life. But somehow, you know, that imposter syndrome jump in and try to maybe, you know, rob me of the opportunity to share with you some of the lessons that I've learned. First of all, give a big shout out to my father, Lenworth Wilson Sr. He's one of those examples of fatherhood that I could see these principles at play in. And so I'm sharing lessons that I've learned over my 40-plus experience of being fathered by him. So principle one, presence. We're going to talk about three different aspects of presence. Now, first aspect is the physical presence. The importance of being physically available and involved in your children's lives. It's not just by chance showing up sometime and they get more used to your absence than your presence. Understand the value of a child knowing that daddy is going to be there or daddy is going to show up. Of a child knowing that versus them having the thought, having the feeling, having the numbness inside towards your absence. Having the thought that I'm not going to get my hopes up because daddy is not going to show up. Even if he says he's going to come to the game, even if he says that, even if he receives the invitation to the graduation, even if the school calls and says we have a parent-teachers meeting and we need you to come, for a child to think daddy's not going to show up, that is impactful. So don't underestimate the value of your presence, your physical presence as a father, being physically available and involved in your children's lives. And then there's emotional presence, providing emotional support and fostering a secure environment. Sometimes this role can be somewhat relegated to mothers. As men, we think that when anything to do with the nurturing and the emotional development, those emotional conversations, the comforting, we think that's the feminine role, and we relegate that. So mothers will take care of that function, and as fathers, we provide. We make sure that there's food on the table, and then or there's money to pay for whatever after school activities. And we think that's our role and we're done. But no, the emotional presence is necessary. Providing that emotional support and fostering a secure environment. An environment where children feel like they can express themselves. And if somebody is harming them, whether with words or with actions, that they can come and have a safe space to say, I don't feel safe in this environment. I don't feel safe with this person, and can have a real conversation about it. So do not take for granted your emotional presence. And then quality time versus quantity time. Balancing work and family life to ensure meaningful interaction. I want to emphasize the word meaningful. Because you can interact with your children, but if you show up and every time the interaction is, did you do your homework? Or what trouble you get in today? Or it's just just these same surface conversation, but nothing a little deeper, how you feeling? Or if they explain that there was some type of interaction, they got in a little trouble, or they got in some conflict with a classmate, or with one of their peers, or with a teacher, and they feel like they can be heard. They feel like when they sit down together with you, they could sit and make plans to go fishing, to go hiking, or even playing video games, something that you might enjoy doing. They may want to watch that football game, that baseball game, whatever sport that you're into, and you could share that with them. So quality time versus quantity time. Because sometimes you can be there a lot. You could be home a lot, but there's no quality time. So put some premium, put some emphasis, put some value on making sure that the time spent is quality time. Make sure that you have real conversations, playful interactions. Make sure that you can properly toe the line between being the father figure, the disciplinarian, the provider, that strong figure that they need to see and feel, but also being that soft presence that they can also experience and interact with and laugh with, and as a part of their childhood. So that's the first principle, presence. The next principle of fatherhood that we want to talk about is role modeling. Now, my background is in education. I was a teacher. I think my passport still says I'm a teacher. But I always emphasize for parents in general, but now specifically for fathers, that your teaching role is 24/7.
Your social and health insurance is your social and health insurance.
Are you SXV insured? Do you have a valid medical insurance status? SXV is cardless. Request your My SXV account today and enter the virtual office of SXV. Go to sxv.sx and sign up now.
Your social and health insurance.
In the aftermath of the passage of Tropical Storm Rafael, assessments will begin to determine the cost on the public purse. Works Minister Robert Morgan says that teams from the National Works Agency NWA will be in the field today. Prime Minister Andrew Holness, however, suggests that estimates could run in the billions.
We are not yet in a position to give definitive figures as to the damage assessment and what it will cost. Our figures are preliminary, but we expect them to be in the wide region of between $500 million to $1 billion.
He says repairs will be financed by the government.
We have created fiscal buffers that are what we have used to support our response to disasters. And we have developed the National Natural Disaster Risk Financing Mechanism. What that is we have made budgetary allocations to create buffers, which we have put into a contingency fund. That fund is approximately about 5 billion Jamaican dollars. And we use that to respond to disasters as they occur.
Meanwhile, in addition to damaged roads, several landslides have been reported.
The general appraisal, we had about 15 roads blocked totally, 10 flooded. Minor road damage was about 2. We had about 7 single lane situations where there was only single lane access. And major, we had about 2 totally impassable roads. The approach of the National Works Agency whenever we have challenges like this is the first objective is to create access. And that is usually single lane access, which will give the opportunity of emergency services and residents in general to exit. The longer term problem is that there are some areas, for example in East Rural, where we have had major landslides, which has essentially destroyed roads. We all saw one on television where the entire community has been cut off. That is going to take some time to repair.
The government says it is looking to make amendments to current laws to increase penalties for criminals involved in mass shootings. The revelation, which was made at today's post-cabinet press briefing, follows several recent shooting incidents. Amoy Harriet tells us more.
106 Jamaicans have been killed in multiple shooting incidents since the start of the year. That's 106 killed in either a double, triple, or quadruple murder. The government says this figure is an improvement compared to last year, but it's arguable whether or not the families of those 106 victims are comforted by this fact. As for the perpetrators,
these persons are not ordinary criminals. They are your worst kind and should be pursued with extreme prejudice.
It's why Prime Minister Andrew Holness says the government will be implementing legislation specifically for perpetrators of mass shootings.
I believe that the police should start to look at these kinds of shootings and seek to prosecute along those lines. Again, that would be a kind of direction that we have given to the police. In other words, we need to start treating these incidents as criminal terrorism.
Now, the current law gives some account for such actions under the Offences Against the Person Act. A person who is convicted of murder, especially one that appears to be calculated, can face life imprisonment or the death penalty. But the Prime Minister says a more targeted approach is needed.
We are examining the legislation to see how we can craft specific laws around that, or whether or not we actually have legislation that can be used together to create that impact.
In the meantime, National Security Minister Dr. Horace Chang says significant progress has been made in the investigations into recent mass shootings, particularly the Cherry Tree Lane, Pleasant Heights, and Bowen Road incidents.
Despite the complexity of these cases, we are making significant progress. In the Cherry Tree Lane incident, we have arrested and charged 2 individuals linked to the gang and seized an illegal firearm. 2 suspects linked to the incident, one of whom was positively identified as a shooter, were fatally shot when they challenged the members of the police force as they sought to apprehend them. The remaining members of the gang are being pursued to be brought to justice. We understand the gravity of the situation and are treating each incident with the utmost priority.
Amoy Harriet, TVJ News.